to me, that really really got me interested when we were down in that area. And I really want to check that. I was really trying to vision myself walking around that ranch. Because before the show, I was looking over some stuff on Skinwalker Ranch. And it's easy to find on the internet. All I have to do is just basically type in Skinwalker Ranch. And it takes you out under the Shell Corporation's name, which is like Antiminium is the Shell Corporation's name. You can take it and go out there and you can kind of like get a visual view of the whole thing. And I was basically scanning around trying to see all the locations that they were at. And I was really trying to find out if there's anything around there that has, let's say, transmitters of any sort, high-powered transmitters, which they're saying there wasn't. And I didn't see, by the way, any towers, like cell phone towers or anything like that, close to where they were when I did my check. There were some airports around there, some smaller airports. I didn't find anything that seemed to stand out there. But I'd really love to dig more into that whole thing. But I wonder, here's this new guy taking over. I wonder, first of all, if Bigelow had the ranch for, I don't know, it was 8 or 10 years or more. Had to be more than 10 years. What prompted him, number one, to sell it?
Well, what was he doing on the ranch to start with?
Research. Well, he was looking at, research. He was looking at the paranormal activities. He'd heard about all this paranormal activity, and he was, Bigelow, one of his connections was Harry Reid, who is in the Senate out in Nevada. He was friends with, got to be friends with Bigelow. Also, Colm Kelleher wrote a book on the Skinwalker Ranch. And that was another connection that Bigelow developed in also, because Bigelow took Colm Kelleher into his institute, National Discovery Science. So they've got that connection. That connection, by the way, also carried over, excuse me, to the stuff they did later on for the government with ATIP. So it's kind of like, I guess you could say, a good old boys network that was gradually being formed, that you had these people getting together. But nonetheless, he's been interested in the paranormal. Bigelow also, by the way, has had his own UFO sightings. And I believe it was his mother also had UFO sightings going back. He is a very, very, very big believer in UFOs. And he's kind of skirts the issue when they ask him publicly about certain details. But he says, I'm definitely a believer, and I've probably spent more money in the United States of any private individual you're going to find on researching UFOs. And he's probably right. But he was very interested in the paranormal, but I'm like, why would you basically say, okay, I'm done with the ranch now and sell it if there's something there? It just makes me think of one of a couple things. Either he got to a point that he didn't think that was producing the results that he was looking for, and he decided to move on and reinvest his money someplace else. When he had his National Institute of Discovery Science, he closed that down before he got involved with the government back in 2004, 2007. He closed that program down because he didn't think that was producing enough results. But then again, maybe the techniques he was using weren't really turning up the right results. Like in this case, if this new group comes in, they put all these cameras out, they put all this electronic equipment out, and they look at things differently, maybe really getting a different group of people in. One of the guys that's on the show on there, Barbara, does have a very, he's got an engineering background. And I've seen him do a couple other shows, I think it was. But he seems like he's very grounded. And maybe, this new team that's in there is finding something enough to keep them digging deeper. I'm just hoping it's just not a show that's being created, just to put a show out there for ratings and to make a few bucks off of it.
Well, I don't know what benefit that would have for the owner to have them out there, quite frankly.
No, I don't either, Barbara. That's the thing. I mean, I can't see him getting rich off of anything like this.
Unless it becomes a tourist place, but I sincerely doubt that'll happen either.
No, I doubt that'll happen.
But speaking of digging, I find it interesting that they're not going to allow that. And why nobody, even when they were up there, supposedly the hillside was illuminated, why nobody bothered to take soil samples unless, again, it just was off air.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. I didn't find anything on the research I did after the other night's show on soil samples, if they'd been collected, if they'd been digging. Now, the show promoted the fact about digging in one of the preview episodes before the series began. So they may be leading up to actually taking samples down the road, but again, it goes back to the Indian lore again, that not to disturb the soil, because if you do, bad things will happen. And one of the individuals who's been out there on the ranch stated that he'd done some things, but then he'd had bad things happen right away. He got sick, and like the swelling on the brain scared him enough that he was going to die. And he's basically backed off from it. Mm-hmm. There's been some other stories that's come out that when individuals were walking around the ranch, even if the new team, that they're hearing voices now come out of nowhere, telling them to leave now, get out of here. And they do it. They don't waste time. They just get out. But they said there's nobody around. And they just have this feeling that, somebody is warning them to get the heck out of there. Yeah. So this is where I'm really curious about the Indian lore. Now, Henry, I'm willing to let you take the first shovelful if you like.
All right, we're going to talk about that when we come back. So we're going to go ahead and take us a quick break. And I think I'll let Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. We're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with your host, Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould. And tonight's always excellent, wonderful guest, Thomas Wertman. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for listening tonight with us here in the chat room, and those from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we've got a great show going on tonight. And speaking from around the world, Barbara, where do we have listeners?
Henry, tonight they're coming in from all over the United States, Britain, Canada, Spain, Malta, and did I say Canada?
Yeah.
It's in there too.
Wow, Malta.
Malta.
I don't remember us having Malta in there.
Nope.
We have once or twice.
Once or twice? Wow.
In a while, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, we got Barbara Duncan with us.
Still here.
Okay. And we got Jeffrey Gould.
I'm still connected.
And I'm going to bring back our guest, Thomas Wertman.
I'm still here. And by the way, Henry, I am letting you take the first shovelful because I just want to make a cup of coffee. And if this is any sign, the cup of coffee my Keurig machine started regurgitating all over the floor. I'm like, this is bad juju. I'm letting Henry definitely go first.
Well, that's one of the questions that I was going to ask to start with. They say that there's not supposed to be any digging. But if you've noticed, there's fences up, so they had to dig holes for that. I'm sure they have wells. There's telephone poles where they got lines coming into the ranch. So how's come a lot of stuff hasn't happened, these people digging those holes?
Good question. That was one of the things I wondered, because when I pulled up the map of the region, I looked at not only like Google Earth, but I looked at, again, my flight tracking maps. And interestingly enough, my flight tracking map shows an area marked ranch, pretty much exactly where Skinwalker Ranch is. I'm like, that's interesting. But they also have marked on an area just south of there, not that far, by the way, all these oil wells. If you go south of there, probably, Henry, maybe 20 miles, if that even, you've got all these oil wells all over the place. And it's like, you know, if there's this, Navajo, in this case, curses, could it be defined to just like that local region, or could it really extend farther? And why wouldn't it affect maybe where they drill those oil wells at then? And that'd be a good question. And you're right. They've got ranches. The ranch would have to drill for water. There are also, if you looked at the TV show, I don't know if you noticed what I did. I could see lights off at a distance. And one of the things I did is I'm like, where are those lights coming from? Well, I approximated the angle they were looking at, and there were other ranches a few miles away, maybe 5 miles away or so. And I'm like, wouldn't they be affected also? Why just that one little small isolated area? I don't know. Maybe there is something super, super special about that little area. One of the individuals I was talking to back a number of years ago told me there was roughly, maybe about 7 areas around the country like Skinwalker Ranch. There was one like this one out in Utah. There's another reportedly someplace in Pennsylvania, which he didn't say exactly where. There was another one that he was working on down in the Missouri area. This one was called Marley Woods. His name was Ted Phillips. Ted passed away early this year. But Ted goes back to the old early days of UFOs and paranormal, back to the old days of In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. And he was also I guess you could say, an understudy of Alan Hynek. He worked with Alan in those early days. And I remember talking to Ted one time, and he was talking about being on this Marley Woods area and seeing orbs off in a distance. He said you'd see these orbs traveling across the fields off in a distance, and one night in particular, he just saw these orbs all over, just moving everywhere in this one region, and he had his camera in his hand, and he's got the camera on, and he's filming the ground because he forgot to raise the camera. He was so awestruck by seeing the lights. And I could just picture, really that happening, that you're seeing something you just can't believe that's going on. And he kind of, you lose focus. But going back to the drilling, hopefully they're going to answer that question down the road, or they'll try drilling in this case on their Henry down the road. But I don't know why the other areas around that region wouldn't be affected. I mean, even maybe 20, 30 miles from there's pumping stations and stuff for oil. So there's got to be all these things around there where there's been drilling.
Right. But also, you wouldn't even have to drill. You go back to that same little crevice that they were in, and you drop a probe down that hole.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I thought of right away, is why don't you take something like a fiber optic cable, something along those lines, and extend it down through that hole and see if you see the source of where that air is rushing from, that they feel almost like that air conditioning. That's one of the things I would have done. I would have gone farther than what they did. You may not be able to get anything like a little small drone down in the hole, but fiber optic cable, something like that, you should be able to. And also even doing something maybe simple like putting pieces of PVC pipe together to give it more rigidity. You assemble it piece after piece, almost like somebody's drilling with the camera attached to take it down and deeper. I don't know why they didn't do that part. Maybe that's just the difference in me. I'd want to go maybe a lot farther than what they did. And it really wouldn't cost that much money to do that if you think about it.